Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news,
New 266 executive decisions were released in the Oval Office during the weekend. Among them, 1. State Secretary Lil Marco will be appointed National Security Advisor in place of Michael Waltz. Secretary Lil Marco will perform the duties associated with both positions simultaneously. 2. State Secretary Lil Marco will also be appointed the new EPA Administrator in place of Lee Zeldin. Secretary Lil Marco will perform the duties associated with the three positions simultaneously. Visibly emotional, Secretary Rubio thanked President Trump for the appointments. Likewise, he declared that he was flattered to be taken into consideration to also replace current Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and that he still has not received permission to return from the Maldives. 3. State Secretary Lil Marco's mission in the Maldives extended until 2026. 4. From now on, President's Day will be moved to June 14, the day of his birthday, and renamed as America's Day. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick engaged in a feisty dispute about who was Trump's best adulator as they were leaving the Oval Office after a to-be UK trade deal was announced. Arguing about who had said the best dithyramb, Prime Minister Starmer declared that 1. President Trump was his hero, and Winston Churchill was a lightweight by comparison. That both Churchill's and Roosevelt's roles in World War II were definitely overrated. 2. That he had an ode he had written himself, where he declares his secret wish of one day being considered worthy of Trump's love, and then proceeded to read it for the press. 3. He was willing to surrender Zelensky, Mers, and even his own wife and mother to the Kremlin if President Trump demanded from him such proof of love. On the other hand, Secretary Lutnick declared that 1. Trump was the best president of the United States, of the world, and of the universe. Take that, George Washington. 2. That he had a tattoo portraying Trump as Rambo on his right buttock and pulled down his pants to prove it. 3. A secret letter where he expresses his wish to become the president's slave, preferably a sex slave, the day Trump decided so. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi denounced British Prime Minister Starmer and Commerce Secretary Lutnick for machismo and misogyny after the aforementioned excluded her from the dispute about who was President Trump's best adulator. Demanding a chance to show that only she could demean herself, she declared that 1. President Trump had saved 250 million lives in the United States. But over 9 billion people worldwide in over 200 countries. 2. Trump University, which she decided not to prosecute after receiving a $25,000 campaign donation, should take over Harvard as homage to President Trump's genius. 3. The Supreme Court should apologize to President Trump for not approving of his disregard for court decisions and the rule of law. Who do they believe they are to judge him? She wondered rhetorically. 4. She and her husband have a large poster of President Trump in their bedroom, precisely over their headboard, which her husband, with special devotion, uses for inspiration. 5. Secretary Lutnick stole her line about Trump being the best president of the United States, of the world, and of the whole universe. After the Washington Post disputed some of Navarro and Lutnick's assertions, the tariffs czar and the Commerce Secretary decided to respond. In their own words, 1. The Washington Post maliciously declares that the jobs of the future, which will come back to America thanks to President Trump's tariffs, will most probably be made by robots, not workers. This reveals profound ignorance as, in alternative facts, both can be true. 2. When Donald Trump said we've got $5 trillion of factories coming to America in 4 years, what he actually meant was $5 trillion per year. But that will always be tetradimensional chess for the likes of the Washington Post because they forget that when you use alternative facts, you have to suspend reality, like in the movies. 3. We have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit. If we cut that 25%, that's 1% of GDP growth in America. $300 billion grows America 1% for the rest of our lives. But because stopping imports would crash our economy, President Biden will get those bad countries to send us their staff for free. That way, they won't have to pay tariffs. 4. The $5 trillion tax cut championed by the president will benefit mostly the working class because as soon as the top 1% receives it, they will have to redistribute it to the working class. That way, we save on distribution costs, and with that, we can eliminate the fiscal deficit. What part of that Mr. Kessler and Mr. Lynch can't understand? 5. Mr. Kessler and Mr. Lynch mocked our statement that the Lieutenant Navarro would bring God's kingdom to earth, and even somebody called me Secretary Lunatic, but that's because they don't believe. Let's see how good their sense of humor is when we send them to Soco in El Salvador to join Paul Krugman. New scandal in Argentina shakes President Milei's presidency. A new scandal, which has even devolved into fistfights in the Argentinian Congress, is hurting President Milei as he tries to show enough stability to convince the IMF to sign a new extended credit facility. Name the IMF uses for loans destined to cover long-term balance of payment needs. The 23rd in the case of Argentina. And though the session was supposed to deal with the crypto scandal that involved Milei weeks ago, it was later revealed that just a few congressmen from La Libertad Avanza, the president's party, had learned of the agenda and instead believed that a new talk show was scouting for guests for upcoming episodes. The IMF expressed its concern about the incident, and that if the Casa Rosada couldn't give satisfaction to President Modi for India's grievances regarding the Argentinian YouTuber Terminester, the signing of the long-term loan might be at risk, which would force Milei to a drastic devaluation of the peso. Just hours after the IMF expressed concern about the session of the Argentinian Congress that was going to debate the crypto scandal affecting President Milei, more damaging news was revealed by the newspaper Clarín. The new scandal involved a company dedicated to tourism packages in Gaza and Sudan that had obtained the president's endorsement at a private event for the tiny amount of $500. The same amount President Milei received for each of his 2 tweets endorsing the dollar Libra meme coin. Currently, the Peronists are investigating other possible scandals. 1. Milei appearing in infomercials endorsing products in exchange for free samples. 2. Milei demanding that visitors to Casa Rosada buy lottery tickets sponsored by his party, La Libertad Avanza. 3. Milei supplying scalpers with tickets to Lali Esposito's concerts during the night and selling dollars during the day. 4. Milei charging $50 to Argentinian media and $150 to international media for interviews and photographs taken with him. An IMF representative declared that the tiny amount charged for the dollar Libra tweets showed that President Milei didn't know how to steal, especially in crypto, where other presidents have at least charged $2 million per tweet, and that if these instances of President Milei selling himself for coins were confirmed, the 23rd IMF loan was out of the question. It's heartbreaking that Argentinian kids will be shunned by Papa Noel this Christmas. But if these accusations against President Milei prosper, we'll have no other choice, added the IMF functionary. President Trump convokes Secretary Rubio to the White House to appoint him interim defense secretary. Secretary Rubio returned briefly from the Maldives to receive a new token of appreciation from President Trump, who appointed him interim defense secretary, just in case the current secretary is forced to resign. Also, in recognition of his loyalty, he was awarded 3 more medals. This makes a total of 12 medals Marco Rubio has been granted by the president. Rubio will perform his duties as State Department Secretary, National Security Advisor, EPA Administrator, and Interim Defense Secretary from the Maldives, and it will be his duty to intervene decisively via secure lines whenever the President allows him to make decisions on matters related to those departments. One day, I will be able to return to the United States and my beloved state of Florida, and I will have more time to express my gratitude to President Trump, who, due to his multiple occupations, has not been able to dedicate me more than 5 minutes in the appointment ceremony. And my medals, I always press them to my chest as I revive that high honor before going to the American consulate in the Maldives to start my workday. The United Conference of Catholic Bishops, with a long conservative tradition, decided to celebrate the election of an American pope, Pope Leo XIV, with an invitation to the brethren to return to the Church with a campaign named Time to Return to God. The core of the campaign is to adapt the teachings of Leo XIV to the faith of real Americans. Thus, when the new pope says that you should love the foreigner, the orphan, and the widow, what he really means is that you must send them to Socorro in El Salvador. And when he speaks about Jesus's love for the poor, what he really means is that the rich need another tax cut. Besides, the conference ratified previous teachings of the Church that declare that Christianity is not about the Good Samaritan parable, but about celebrating Christmas with gifts before tariffs make them prohibitively expensive, calling Muslims towelheads, deriding gays, celebrating Uncle Bibi's colorful attacks on Gaza, and cutting SNAP and Medicaid. Senate Minority Leader Schumer presented his new plan, Playing Dead to Win, which will replace his confusion strategy. Considered by DNC Chair Ken Martin as too aggressive, the confusion strategy led to Schumer's vote in Congress for the continuing resolution that gave him polemic powers over Congress's appropriations, and to the strong letter he sent to President Trump. All these extreme measures had become a distraction to our mission of taking Rachel Zegler's Snow White to the first spot on Disney+. How is the Harris-Biden ticket going to face the voters in 2028 if we can't get at least that? Asked Chair Martin rhetorically. Ken is right, declared Senator Schumer. When voters at last understand that Trump is not cool, they will come back to us and demand that we ask their pronouns. The U.S. Army is planning a parade for Trump's birthday and, incidentally, for its own anniversary. President Trump will be celebrating his 79th birthday while the Army will celebrate 250 years since its creation. Since this is the first event of its type on American soil, and following the advice of Russian President Vladimir Putin, President Trump's personal friend, the parade will count with Russian weapons and the participation of Russian soldiers and officers who will come to train their American counterparts in the details of an event of such magnitude. The training involves the presence of the Russian army in American bases and the Pentagon for an indefinite period, before and after the parade, to make sure the event meets President Trump's expectations. Asked by American media about the costs, President Trump declared that he had already decided cuts to Social Security and Medicare to make sure the parade costs would not affect the deficit. Justin McCall, 28, from Florida, accidentally shot himself in the leg while he tried to steal a vehicle using a gun. The accidental discharge forced McCall to plead to his victim for help to take him to the nearest hospital, where he was arrested and taken to Okaloosa County's sheriff's office. Because of his large criminal record, his recidivism in car robbery, and the use of a gun and intimidation, McCall faced a condemn of at least 20 years according to Florida law. Yet, McCall decided to join the National Rifle Association, which advocated for the inmate, assigned him a lawyer, and got his sentence reduced to 6 months of community service. Besides, as the reason alleged by the defense was that Florida had not protected McCall's Second Amendment for not providing him with safe use of guns training, the defendant will have to prove that he has satisfactorily completed such training. Moreover, just as in other cases since January 6, the defendant joined the Republican Party and declared himself a patriot. I am doing that as an insurance policy. If I am caught in my next job, I will always be able to allege that, like the patriots of January 6th, I was motivated by my deeply held religious beliefs. Those NRA lawyers are real good, man, added McCall after his release.
This has been the news of this hour. Sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.